Hello and welcome back to another Heritage Live. My name is Evelyn. I'm a Heritage Assistant here at Coquitlam Heritage. Coquitlam Heritage gratefully operates on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coquitlam First Nations, who continue to live on these lands and care for them, along with the waters and all that is above and below. These lands are also the traditional territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Kakate, and Katzie First Nations. Thank you for tuning in today, and special thanks to Emily for help with streaming. In honor of back to school season, I'm going to take you through one of our local high school collections. Centennial Secondary School moved to its current location in 2017, and the original building was torn down in 2018. Coquitlam Heritage went through and saved what we could. The building was a treasure trove of student life through the ages. So we will take a look at some examples of how teenage life evolved at Centennial over the years. It's clear from these artifacts that priorities and attitudes may have changed over time, but there's always something consistent and timeless about life as a high school student. So Centennial Secondary School opened in 1967, so you might be able to guess why it was called Centennial. 1967 was the 100-year anniversary of Canada's Confederation. The federal government put a lot of effort and funding into strengthening Canadian society. This included fun events like bathtub races and Expo 67, but it also included opening new museums and schools like Centennial Secondary. On its opening, students marched from Como Lake to the new building. There were 1,100 students in the march, all in costume. Each student placed a lead slug with their name on it on a cairn when they reached the school to mark the occasion. Can you pass me some gloves? Sorry. I need some gloves to handle these artifacts I'm about to show you. Thank you so much. So the first one is Centennial's official opening document, the Centennial Story. So this booklet gives some background on the history and philosophy of the school. The idea to open a school in District 43 first came about in 1963 to address Coquitlam's growth. This was the first time that a school in Coquitlam had received federal financial aid. The school offered pre-vocational, technical, and academic classes. It also offered part-time and evening and classes for adults. So students were encouraged to continue education after Centennial, but they were also being groomed for the work life. They even designed the office orientation classroom to be set up like a modern office. The school emphasized the pursuit of knowledge through individual initiative. So in other words, students were expected to be on top of their schedule, their classes, and their workload without any hand-holding from staff. So according to this document, students may come and go as they please, but apparently they didn't even have alarm bells when it first opened, and it was up to the students to manage their time. So all of this information is highlighted in the Centennial Story official opening document, mostly here, the philosophy. The booklet goes on to explore the modern amenities that the school had and offered, such as the state-of-the-art cafeteria for the food services program. They also had dictaphones for the secretarial class, light tables for map making. They even had a wooden lathe for woodworking and a metal enameling equipment for the art classes. We can also talk about some yearbooks. So the school mascot for Centennial was a centaur, because who doesn't love some good alliteration? This emblem was featured on many artifacts we collected, mostly yearbooks and newspapers, but also sports paraphernalia. There was a huge painting of a centaur by Gordon Smith hanging in the weight room, which I guess might have been just for some inspiration. This book, as you can see the centaur on it, this book is from 2013. It was the 2012-2013 yearbook. And it explains the symbolism of the centaur for the school in the front page along here. And it explains that they represent strong warriors and how powerful we are when we work together to improve the world. It also does a great job as an intimidation symbol for sports teams. The principal of Centennial during the teardown, who is still the principal today, sums up the centaur symbolism by saying, "At Centennial, we hope the centaur mascot symbolizes the very best in humanity. The head and heart of a human characterizes the wisdom, rationality, intelligence, and empathy we hope to instill in our students, while the body and legs of a horse represent the power, stability, and determination and grace afforded to the docile beast." So we know yearbooks are an excellent time capsule and freeze a pivotal moment in student life, but they can also be great for a snapshot of what was happening in the world at the time. So a lot of these yearbooks have a section at the back called World Beat that talks about the news and pop culture of the time. This one, for some reason, is called the Canadian Memory Capsule, even though most of this news is not Canadian. All the others were called World Beat, though. This one chose to highlight the Keystone XL pipeline protests and Will and Kate's first baby, the Syrian war, Aung San Suu Kyi being elected leader of Myanmar, Canadian cash switching from paper to polymer, and Carly Rae Jepsen's smash hit Call Me Maybe, which actually came out in 2011, but it was so good it was still relevant 2 years later. It's also interesting to look back at these highlights now, thinking of how they have evolved, like the Keystone Pipeline being canceled by President Biden, and Harry and Meghan kind of monopolizing royal news now, and Canadians taking in Syrian refugees, the coup in Myanmar, where the military seized control from Aung San Suu Kyi back in February of this year, and even plastic cash kind of being a thing of the past, thanks in part to COVID-19 and how we now want to limit shared handling, and then also how Carly Rae Jepsen became a Canadian pop princess with a devoted following and an impeccable discography. I highly recommend that everyone listens to her album Dedicated. We also have this yearbook from 2014. This one is one of my favorites because it is huge and it is filled with information, but it also, the cover evokes sort of classic nostalgia, which is very fitting because it mentions the new school that is going to be coming up 3 years later. This one, along with a couple other ones, also highlighted students' achievements outside of school. For instance, Tamara O'Brien here was an accomplished trampolinist, and she later won silver at the World Cup in Poland in 2017. The Centennial didn't print yearbooks for most of the 70s and 80s, and instead they gave out student directories, like this one. They look sort of like yearbooks because they have students' headshots in alphabetical order, but they have their phone numbers and addresses printed below, which I really don't think would fly today for fear of bullying and harassment and privacy issues. But I find this one particularly fun because it has a doodle on it. And it also has some long division equations on the front and on the back, which is just so quintessential of student life. This is one of our artifacts that really represents and shows the personality of the students. Our final yearbook is the first yearbook that was printed for the school in 1967, the year of Canada's Confederation. You can see the stylized maple leaf here. This was not unique to the school. This was the first time we saw the emblem of the school, which is the capital C, with the stylized maple leaf. But the maple leaf was the symbol of the Centennial for Canadian Confederation, and it was seen all over the country. It is divided into 11 equilateral triangles to represent the 10 provinces and the Northwest Territories, because this was the geography accepted by the Canadian government at the time. You can also see that same stylized maple leaf inside the C, representing Centennial School, on this brick that we recovered from the original building. It was torn down 50 years after it was first erected. In fact, it was the same year as the sesquicentennial, or the 150th anniversary of Canadian Confederation. And in that year, Canada revamped federal government revamped the stylized maple leaf to include Yukon and Nunavut. So saving this commemorative memento from the original building illustrates just how much this place meant to the community and the students who went there. Saving the brick was initiated by Jess Doyle, who was Principal Dan Doyle's son. And we're going to talk more about Dan Doyle later because he was pretty integral to the history of the school. The plaque also, which I think is fun, is the same style as the room number plaques that we're seeing around the school. So staff and students moved into the new building in 2017, but the original building wasn't torn down until 2018. So we collected this brick, which is actually part of a larger cinder block, as well as another cinder block, after the building came down, and all others were collected while the building was still standing. This one was donated to us by the current principal, Anthony Ciolfito, at the 50th anniversary celebration. Okay, and now for sports. So this football, is covered in signatures and writing. So you would think that it would be full of significant sports history and information, but it really doesn't say too much. It reads, runner-up Fraser Valley Poco Trophy winner in 1971. Poco is illegible. We're not sure what kind of trophy this was. So we originally thought that it was a football based on the laces and the size. It is larger than most footballs, but CFL regulations have larger footballs than American, so we thought it was just a CFL regulated football. The texturing is actually more similar to that of a rugby ball, but we know that this was used in 1971, and footballs had different texturing than what they do today prior to the 1980s. However, based on information that we gathered from the student newspaper, that I will talk more about later, the Centennial football team did not have a good season in 1971. They were not a runner-up for anything, so it seems pretty unlikely that they would keep a memento with everyone's signature from a pretty uneventful season. On the other hand, the rugby team had their best season to date in 1971. They came second in the Fraser Valley Rugby League, and this was the first time the team made it to the playoffs. They had an undefeated season prior to that, but they ultimately lost to Langley. So that game that they lost would have been a very important game for a very important team. This leads me to believe that this is in fact a rugby ball. So 1971 was also the year before the provincial rugby championships were introduced, meaning that the Fraser Valley Rugby League would have been as high as a high school team could have gone. So if there's a football or rugby ball enthusiast out there who can tell us exactly what kind of ball this is, please get in contact with us, because after all of this research, I'm suddenly really curious about the differences between footballs and rugbies. So as I mentioned, we were going to talk about Dan Doyle. This is the Doyle Award. It recognizes outstanding athletic achievements. It was created and named after Dan Doyle, who was the principal at Centennial for many years. And he, like many at Centennials, was a sports fanatic. He was a high school football coach for 33 years. He was a founding member of the Coquitlam Secondary Athletic Association. He was even an inaugural inductee into the Coquitlam Sports Hall of Fame. Dan Doyle believed sports was a way of life, and this award was created with that in mind. This is an award for outstanding athletic achievement, but the recipient also needed to demonstrate a high standard of morals, academics, and a desire to help and teach others, as well as to learn while displaying a high standard of sportsmanship, both on the field and in class. So after 65 years, students are still awarded the Doyle Award, but it is now a trophy. So the Doyle Award demonstrates the central role of sports at Centennial Secondary, in Centennial Secondary culture. The school has a large number of teams for different sports and their efforts were always documented in the Catalyst, which is the school newspaper. It was run as part of a journalism class at first, and it came out almost every month that the school was open during the school year. So Centennial boasts many achievements across all fields of sports and with recognized athletes. The 1987-1988 Centennial girls basketball team was inducted into the Coquitlam Sports Hall of Fame in 2017 for being back-to-back provincial champions. They developed a rivalry with the Salmon Arm Jewels in 1987 when they defeated them in the finals. And then these issues of the Catalyst from 1988 follow that rivalry. So when they were inducted into the Sports Hall of Fame, they were celebrated as the underdog. And this narrative is mirrored through these 3 newspapers that I'm going to show you. So this one is from January 1988. You can see on the back here that it says Jewels outshine Centaurs. So early on in the season, they were defeated by their rivals. And then 1 month later, it says, girls win their local league. So they're coming back, following the underdog story. And 1 month after that, they are featured on the cover because they won the finals. So here they are pictured with their banner and saying, girls retain BC championships. So this story was followed pretty closely, and that is why they were inducted into the Coquitlam Sports Hall of Fame. The Catalyst also put out survival guides at the beginning of every year for new students to help orient themselves. They featured a map and information on clubs and introductions to staff, but they always had a fantastic illustration on the cover. This one is from 2005. It features an ethnographic drawing of high school stereotypes. It's so fun how indicative these images are of their time. Like, I do not think that this would be seen on a high school today, like classifying students into such rigid stereotypes. There's also only one woman on the cover, and she has a whale tail happening and is called Flirtus Maximus. So that's not great. But also, is homie a stereotype? Don't remember that. Yeah, and then also the fashion. Like, we were starting to see these trends come back. Don't know if you heard, low rise is back in. And these crop tops, and maybe soon we'll see the once ubiquitous belly button ring make a reappearance. The Catalyst also confronted debate topics of the time. Many of these received ongoing attention through the years. This one, from 1997, featured a point-counterpoint on whether sexuality should be included in the school curriculum. You can read that here. So it printed the opposite opinions of 2 students discussing whether or not they should be addressing homosexuality with teens, and if this should be done in school or at home. One student calls homosexuality a moral issue, which is also probably something that wouldn't fly in student newspapers today. But it's so interesting to see how the topic of sexuality has evolved to include many more people and built platforms for other topics like gender identity. It is a great example of a stage in a contentious and evolving topic that is much more visible in our local society and schools today. Thank you. So I'm also going to talk to you about some signs that we found that were hanging up around the school. So Centennial offered lots of different classes. A big one was woodworking. The building was full of directional signs, like this one. And these were made by the students in the woodworking class. So I've chosen 2 that I think really represent the personality of the school. This one has some minor graffiti on it. It has, sorry, pick that back up. Probably can't see, but in this arrow, it has the classic Reba was here, someone was here. And at the bottom, you can see someone's Instagram or Twitter handle, which is so fun. It's like that style of graffiti where you tag things. So So it's sort of like tagging with your own handle. Yes, and then this one, also you'll notice that the only thing that's in red, that's not in blue, is main office. And so this is obviously because most people who are not familiar with the school would be looking for where the main office is, but I think it looks so ominous. And I like to think of the students who made this just expressing their disdain for the main office by painting it red. You can see on this second sign that the main office is also red here. And there's another student's signature. Where is it? Right here. Very hard to see, but it says Samantha written in green above the arrow, which is fun. It makes it seem like Samantha is always to your right. And it also has minor graffiti and the classic teenage vandalism of sticking gum to things, as you can see in this O in classroom. So these signs present such personality. It's the personality of the school, of the building, of the students who made it, and the students who vandalized it. And I appreciate that the students made the school their own. They really chose to leave their mark on it, as you can see in some of these artifacts, because you can be sure that the school left their mark on them. If you have any items of your time at Coquitlam Schools that you might be interested in donating, please get in touch with us. We would love to chat with you. And with that, I would like to say thank you for tuning in today. I have really enjoyed exploring a selection of these artifacts with you. Keep your eye out early next year for the launch of our new online database, which will feature items from Centennial Collection along with many others. So keep your eye on our website and social media channels for more information, and have a great day.